poor girl enters a millionaire's car thinking it's her Uber, and she steals his heart. What began as a mistake would unravel secrets, reopen old wounds, and stitch together a love neither of them saw coming. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, sit back and enjoy this unforgettable story. The rain in Chicago wasn't gentle that night. It was loud, the kind of rain that slapped against pavement in sharp, uneven bursts, soaking shoes and turning sidewalks into shallow rivers. The kind of rain that turned rush hour into a full-blown war zone of honking horns, flickering wiper blades, and blinding reflections off polished black sedans. Eva Moreno stood under the crooked awning of a downtown cafe, her umbrella bent backward like a broken wing. Her tote bag sagged with water. The piece of paper she clutched, the onboarding packet for her new temp job, was beginning to dissolve in her hands. Of course her phone had died. Of course the charger was back in her brother's apartment across town. Of course the bus skipped her stop. Because this was her life now, duct-taped together with half-baked hope and a prayer. She squinted down the curb. A sleek black car pulled up idling with its hazards on. It had the general vibe of an Uber, tinted windows, quiet, confidence, expensive, but generic. And more importantly, it was the only car that hadn't peeled away in the last 5 minutes. Eva didn't hesitate. She yanked the door open and dove inside. "Hi, sorry. Yes, I'm Eva." She rushed out, slamming the door behind her and shaking off the rain. "I know I'm late. Please don't cancel the ride. I swear I'm good for 5 stars and a heartfelt tip." She buckled her seatbelt with the speed of someone on the verge of both tears and a caffeine crash. The car smelled like cedarwood and leather, warm, masculine, expensive. "Okay," she exhaled, brushing wet curls from her face. "Let's go. Let's." Silhouette House, River North. The driver said nothing. Eva blinked at the rearview mirror. She couldn't see much, just the outline of a sharp jaw and what looked like an expensive coat collar. He didn't even look at her. Not a talker. That's okay. Honestly, I respect that. After the day I've had, silence might be the only thing holding me together. She kicked off her soggy heels and rubbed her aching feet. "Do you ever just—" She paused, waving vaguely at the rain-smeared windows, "wake up? Thinking today's the day it all finally works out, and then you burn your oatmeal, miss the bus, lose your umbrella, and end up barefoot in a stranger's car, trying to pretend your life isn't one long blooper reel." Still no response. "Right," she muttered, suddenly aware of how loudly her voice filled the quiet cabin. "Maybe it's just me." The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent, gliding through the city like a shadow. Eva leaned her head against the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. She should have been nervous, maybe even scared, but something about the driver's silence didn't feel threatening. It felt patient, like he was letting her have her moment, or maybe just waiting her out. "I'm not usually this chaotic," she added after a beat. "I mean, I am, but usually in a more charming way." A red light halted their momentum. She caught a glimpse of him again in the mirror. Clean-cut, unreadable, and definitely not wearing a driver's uniform. In fact, if she were less soaked and more observant, she might have noticed his black wool coat looked like something from Silhouette House, not driving to it. Too late now. She shifted in her seat. "Look, I know this is crazy, but I swear I wasn't trying to carjack you. My phone's dead and I can't afford another missed day. I'm supposed to be working in the fabric room tonight, temp position. My rent depends on it." A soft click. The sound of the car doors locking. She froze. Then she realized they'd just pulled into the roundabout driveway of a high-rise with gold-lettered signage and glass doors dripping with luxury Silhouette House. Her stomach dropped. No. This wasn't her Uber. This wasn't a rideshare at all. The car stopped. The driver didn't say a word. Instead, he turned slightly, just enough to look at her directly for the first time. He had the kind of face that magazines called sharp-featured, and her mother would have called dangerous. His eyes were a cool, unreadable gray, and they lingered on her not unkindly, but definitely amused. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I am going to get out now," she said slowly, very calmly, "and pretend this never happened." She grabbed her shoes, her bag, and her pride and scrambled out of the car like it might explode behind her. Inside the lobby, she tried to act normal. A security guard raised an eyebrow at her drenched state, but she waved the badge from her onboarding packet like it was armor. Eva Moreno, she announced, though her voice cracked. New hire. Starting tonight. The elevator ride up was the longest 30 seconds of her life. The Silhouette House fabric room looked like the inside of a dream rose of silk and organza in every color, tables littered with pinned sketches, a massive mood board covered in photos of runways and museum textiles. Eva stood there barefoot, drying her feet with a spare muslin scrap, trying to will herself invisible. Don't think about the car. Don't think about how good he smelled. Don't think about how you monologued about oatmeal to a complete stranger. And especially don't think about the door opened behind her. Voices, footsteps, laughter from designers and interns returning from a meeting, and then silence. He walked in like he owned the place. Because he did. Cole Harrington, CEO of Silhouette House, fashion's coldest rising king, the man whose signature turned struggling brands into global icons, the face on the cover of Vogue Business last month, and the man who drove her here. Eva didn't breathe. He passed by her smooth as silk, unbothered and untouchable. But just before he left the room, he paused, looked back, raised an eyebrow. Still owe me that 5-star rating, he said. And then he was gone. Eva stared at the doorway, heart doing cartwheels. Oh, my God, she whispered, then louder to no one in particular. Kill me now. Eva stared at the doorway like it had betrayed her. The room buzzed back to life, interns chatting, machines humming, fabric rustling, but her insides had gone perfectly still. Only the roar of humiliation remained. Still owe me that 5-star rating. She pressed the heels of her hands to her cheeks, which were currently the temperature of molten embarrassment. Somewhere in the back of her mind, her inner voice was already composing the headline, Girl Mistakes Fashion Tycoon for Uber. Delivers soliloquy about burned oatmeal. Dies of cringe and floor-length tulle. Everything okay? A voice whispered behind her. Eva turned to find a petite young woman adjusting a bolt of emerald velvet. She looked about 21, sharp-eyed and sweet-faced. Her name tag read Naomi. Eva nodded too quickly. Oh yeah, just realized I brought the wrong fabric scissors. Naomi gave her a look that said, You're a terrible liar, but smiled anyway. Don't worry. Everyone's weird on their first day. Eva exhaled gratefully and turned back to the stack of organza swatches she'd been tasked with organizing. Her hands moved automatically, sort by texture, then by dye tone, but her brain was still in the car, still retracing every moment from the point she yanked the door open to the moment Cole Harrington's voice curled around her like a velvet rope. She remembered the way his hands rested on the steering wheel, relaxed but confident, the subtle cut of his coat sleeve against the leather seat. The fact that he never once interrupted her ramble, not even when she complained about rent and rich people in the same breath. He'd just driven quiet, steady, watchful. Was he laughing at her the whole time, amused, pitying? And worse, why did part of her care what he thought she shut the drawer of swatches a little too forcefully? A roll of silk toppled off the table. Naomi helped catch it mid-fall with practiced ease. Seriously, you okay? Eva hesitated. I think I may have accidentally insulted our CEO on the way to work. Naomi froze. Wait, you're the girl who got out of Cole's car. Eva's eyes widened. People saw, oh no, just me, Naomi said quickly, glancing around. But I saw you from the service elevator. You looked like you were having a panic attack. I was having several, simultaneously. Naomi bit back a laugh. Okay, but honestly, kind of legendary. No one ever talks to him like that. Eva slumped against the table. I wasn't talking to him. I was talking at him. There's a difference. It's like I gave a TED talk on public transportation and personal failure. Well, he didn't fire you. That's a good sign. Eva looked toward the hallway again. Her heart still hadn't slowed down. No, he didn't fire her. He didn't even seem annoyed. If anything, he'd looked intrigued, as if she were a pattern he hadn't quite figured out, which was terrifying and a little thrilling. Naomi, she whispered, I'm not cut out for this place. Naomi smiled, looping a piece of measuring tape over her shoulders like a scarf. Sure you are. Places like this don't change until people like you walk in. Eva wanted to believe that. But right now, all she could think about was her secondhand flats, her soaked tote bag, and the way Cole Harrington's eyes had flickered with something that looked suspiciously like recognition, as if he'd really seen her through all the panic and the puddles. And that was more unsettling than anything else. The next morning's Silhouette House glittered like a dream. Morning light poured through glass walls, refracting across crystal chandeliers and bouncing off polished marble floors. Interns in designer sneakers zipped past models balancing coffee and croissants on 10-inch heels. Laughter, fabric, chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Eva arrived early, hoping to stay invisible. She'd spent the entire night spiraling between horror and disbelief. She even Googled, "What to do when you accidentally Uber your CEO?" No helpful results. Just a Reddit thread involving a girl, a hedge fund manager, and an unfortunate karaoke duet. She wore the only dry outfit she had left, black turtleneck high-waisted slacks and vintage loafers with the soles duct-taped underneath. She'd pinned her curls back and swiped on red lipstick, not because she felt confident, but because she needed something that made her look like she belonged. Naomi was already at the fabric table, cross-referencing orders with a clipboard. Eva whispered a quiet, "Hey," and got to work. No sign of Cole. No mention of Cole. Maybe by some miracle yesterday would be forgotten. Then the door opened, and the air changed. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Cole Harrington walked in like the room rearranged itself around him. Tailored charcoal suit, gold cufflinks, crisp white shirt with a collar so sharp it could draw blood. His hair was darker than she remembered, slicked back neatly, but not overly styled. He wore command like a second skin, natural, effortless, terrifying. He didn't glance her way. He walked straight through the fabric department, trailed by a team of designers and junior execs, all clutching portfolios and iPads like religious texts. His voice was low but firm. He asked about shipment delays, hem inconsistencies, and whether the Swarovski crystals for the Senegal capsule collection had arrived on time. He paused by a rack of unfinished gowns. "This hemline," he murmured, lifting the edge of a violet dress with 2 fingers. "It's apologizing for itself. Make it deliberate, or take it apart." The junior designer beside him nodded, trembling slightly. Eva stayed very still. He was 10 feet away now, maybe 12. "Don't move, don't blink, don't even exist." He turned toward Naomi, and this Naomi cleared her throat. Eva Moreno adjusted that one. The bust line was off. She reshaped the darts. Cole looked at the dress, then at Eva. She held his gaze this time, even though her heart tripped all over itself. A pause. Then just the faintest flicker of amusement in his expression. "Still owe me that 5-star rating," he said, with 0 context and 0 warning. Eva's face went up in flames. The entire room froze. Someone coughed. Naomi's pen clattered to the ground. Eva gave a weak smile. "You'll get it when you stop driving like you own the road." He raised one eyebrow. "I do." He turned and walked out, taking the stunned silence with him. 30 minutes later, Eva was still trying to breathe normally. Naomi wheeled a rack past her and stage whispered, "Girl, girl." Eva buried her face in a bolt of satin. "Why is he like this?" "You're telling me he brought it up first?" Naomi leaned in. "I thought I imagined that whole car situation. I assumed it was a dream, a sexy, terrifying dream. I was trying to disappear. Too late." Eva didn't know what unsettled her more, the fact that Cole remembered their encounter, or that he chose to mention it in front of half the design floor with that unreadable smirk that made her question all her life choices. She reached for her notebook and pretended to write down fabric codes while her brain ran in circles. This was bad, very bad, because now she wasn't just the temp girl with a secret past. She was the temp girl who accidentally carpooled with her billionaire boss and bantered with him like she had a reason to belong here. And the worst part, she kind of wanted to belong. By mid-afternoon, she retreated to the back corner of the storage vault where the less glamorous rolls of fabric were kept. It smelled like starch and old wood, and the silence was a welcome change from the fashion floor chaos. She crouched down to reorganize the wool section when she heard footsteps. She straightened slowly, heart hammering again. Cole stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. He glanced around the small storage room like it was unfamiliar terrain. His gaze landed on the thank you notes tucked under the table, dozens of little scraps of paper taped haphazardly in a collage of kindness. He reached for one. Eva stepped forward quickly. "Don't." He looked up. She swallowed. "They're not for show, just reminders." He read the top note anyway, handwritten frayed edges. "Thanks for fixing my hem and my confidence. I didn't cry at my wedding after all. Jasmine Seabride. Another, you saved me from getting fired. I owe you my job and my sanity. Ava D." Intern. Cole didn't smile this time. He held the note gently like it was something sacred. "You helped all these people," he said softly. Eva crossed her arms. "It's not part of the job description. That's why it matters." Their eyes met again, and this time there was no embarrassment, no panic, just a quiet current running between them, recognition maybe. The beginning of understanding. "I didn't know who you were," Eva said. "I mean, I knew who you were, just not then." "I know," he said. Another silence. "Then you weren't wrong, by the way," he added, gesturing toward the door. "About rent, and rich people, and oat milk conspiracies." A breath of laughter escaped her throat before she could stop it. "Still not giving you 5 stars?" she said, lifting her chin. His mouth curved just a little. "Then I guess I'll have to earn it." And with that, he turned and left her alone again, this time with more questions than answers, but also with the smallest flicker of something else. Possibility. Eva didn't move for a long time after he left. The room felt heavier somehow, not from discomfort, but from the quiet imprint he'd left behind. She stared at the note in his hand, now resting neatly on the edge of the table like he hadn't read it at all, as if he understood how sacred those scraps were to her, how they kept her going when everything else said, "Give up." One note had smudged ink from the day she cried while taping it up. Another had a drawing of a crooked dress from a child whose mother she'd secretly helped sew a recital outfit for. None of them were meant to be seen by anyone but her, certainly not by the CEO of a fashion empire. And yet, he hadn't scoffed. He hadn't called it sentimental or messy or unprofessional. He'd just read with that infuriating calm of his, like he saw her. Not just the pressed temp assistant with red lipstick and duct-taped shoes, but the whole Eva. Maybe you weren't just the wrong car. Maybe you were the right detour. She didn't want to think that. Couldn't afford to. Her fingers tightened around the hem of a half-cut wool swatch, the edge rough against her skin. A part of her was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. The part that had learned never to trust a spotlight unless you were ready to burn under it. The part that remembered what happened the last time someone in power called her special. She took a shaky breath and crouched back down, resuming the reshelving task with meticulous focus. Fold, label, stack, control the controllable. Naomi appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, a half-eaten granola bar in one hand. "Okay, I've waited long enough." "What happened?" Eva blinked up at her. "What do you mean? Don't even try it," Naomi said, stepping into the room. "You disappeared. He disappeared. And then I walked past here and felt vibes, like real ones. And not the scary corporate kind." Eva gave a hollow laugh. "It wasn't like that." Naomi tilted her head. "Okay, then what was it like?" Eva hesitated. How could she explain the strange stillness in the room when he stood there? The way he didn't try to flatter or flirt or assert power, just stood with her in the quiet, reading the words that kept her stitched together. She shook her head. It was surprising. Naomi raised a knowing eyebrow. "Surprising's how it starts." Eva stood, brushing lint from her pants. "He's the CEO, Naomi. I'm a temp who gets paid hourly and eats instant noodles 4 times a week. So, this place is a palace, and I'm not the kind of girl they let stay after midnight." Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Then she said gently, "Maybe you're the one who changes what kind of girl gets to stay." Ava didn't answer, but she reached into her bag later that night and added another note to the collection. This one was in her own handwriting. You are not here by mistake. Keep going. Cole Harrington wasn't the type to linger. Not on fabric, not on small talk, and certainly not on people. Yet here he was sitting alone in his corner office, staring at a bundle of handwritten notes he wasn't supposed to see. He'd gone back. After the floor cleared out, after the interns went home and the final emails were sent, he'd returned to the fabric vault under the guise of checking shipment samples. But he hadn't touched a single roll. Instead, he'd stood in front of the taped-up collage like it was a gallery wall in some secret museum. The notes were mismatched in color and handwriting, some on printer paper, some torn from notebooks, a few on coffee-stained receipts. But every single one spoke to something money couldn't buy: kindness, quiet skill, dignity restored. And they all mentioned her. Eva Moreno. He turned one of the notes over and found a small embroidered flower sewn into the corner of the paper, like someone couldn't help but stitch beauty into even the forgotten corners of life. Who are you? He murmured aloud. Eva across town didn't feel beautiful, or particularly kind, or even competent. She was curled up on her brother's couch knees tucked under her, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and socks that didn't match. Her curls were frizzed from the earlier rain. Her stomach grumbled, but she was too wired to eat. Luis dropped a paper bag of empanadas on the coffee table and flopped beside her. I saw that look, he said. That I messed up at work and my world is ending look. I didn't mess up, she said quickly. Technically. He gave her a look. Technically, Eva sighed, rubbing her eyes. I might have accidentally gotten into my boss's car and then later argued with him about his driving and oat milk conspiracies. Luis blinked. That's a sentence I wasn't prepared for. And now he keeps showing up, talking to me, asking things, like what, like who I am. Luis's expression softened. Well, maybe it's time someone asked. She swallowed. Luis leaned forward. He doesn't know, does he? Number Ava. He doesn't need to know, she said sharply. It's in the past. Luis didn't press further, but the silence between them thickened. She stood and walked to her old sewing box tucked beside the radiator. Inside, under a faded velvet swatch, sat a laminated clipping from a fashion blog 6 years ago, the girl who burned bright and vanished Eva Moreno's tragic fall from stardom. She turned it face down. Luis watched her carefully. It wasn't your fault. I was the designer, she said flatly. My name was on the collection. Your mentor left candles burning near the final pieces. The fire was an accident. The smear campaign after that was someone else's ego, not yours. I was 17. And you're 26 now. You've earned the right to be more than a headline. She ran a finger along the stitching on the old fabric, suddenly quiet. I just wanted to disappear, she said. But now, he's looking. Luis raised an eyebrow. And how do you feel about that? She didn't answer, but her cheeks flushed, and her fingers didn't stop tracing the threads. The next day at Silhouette House, Eva arrived early again, this time with her game face on. No duct tape, no panic. She wore her mother's vintage blazer tailored perfectly to her frame and carried her own tools instead of asking to borrow Naomi's. She was reorganizing a display table when a shadow fell over her arm. Cole. He said nothing at first, just watched her line up the zippers with almost obsessive precision. Finally he spoke. You're not just an assistant. Eva didn't look up. I'm whatever you hired me to be. That's not what I asked. She straightened, met his gaze. Why do you care? She asked softly. He studied her, his eyes unreadable again. Because people who leave kindness in their wake don't usually end up hiding in back rooms. A pause. She took a breath. I used to be someone in this industry. Once. He said nothing, just waited. She turned slightly, voice quieter now. But people don't forget a failure that made headlines, especially when it burns your name into ash. His eyes flickered, realization setting in. The fire. She nodded once. My first and last solo show. I was a kid trying to build something beautiful, and it ended with smoke and lawsuits. He didn't say I'm sorry. Instead, he said something far better. They shouldn't have erased you. Her throat tightened. She looked away, afraid of what she might say if she didn't. But he didn't press, didn't demand more. Just stood beside her quietly like he was saying, "I'll wait." Cole didn't follow her when she turned away. Instead, he looked at the half-pin dress on the mannequin beside them, a structured jacket dress in a deep plum silk that shimmered under the studio lights. It had strong shoulders, a gentle taper at the waist, and unfinished buttons that hung loose like afterthoughts. "Is this yours?" he asked. Eva, still facing the fabric wall, hesitated. "Technically, no. I just fixed it." Cole ran his fingers along the sleeve seam, noting how the inside lining had been hand-stitched. It wasn't factory work. It was intimate, personal, quietly masterful. "She designed it," came Naomi's voice from the hall. Eva turned, startled. Naomi shrugged unapologetically as she walked in, pushing a cart of bead samples. "Sorry, but he should know. You didn't just fix that piece, you transformed it. The collar was bulky, the silhouette wrong for the model cast. You made it sing." Cole arched a brow now, watching Eva more closely. "You did all that on your own." Eva gave Naomi a warning glance, but her coworker just smirked and disappeared back down the hallway. Left with no out, Eva crossed her arms. "I can't not see the flaws. It's a curse." Cole looked thoughtful. "No, it's a gift. One people would kill to have in this business." Her throat tightened. He had no idea. He had no idea what it meant to be a teenage girl with talent, but no power, no money for PR, no protection from betrayal. When the fire happened, when the press turned, when the designer who once called her brilliant suddenly claimed she'd stolen ideas, she'd been utterly alone, except for Luis, and the thank you notes, and the work. She cleared her throat. "Doesn't matter. I'm not here to redesign anything. I'm here to inventory pearl clasps and sweep the atelier floors." "You're here because you didn't give up," Cole said. She blinked. "That matters to me," he added softer this time. "More than you know." The words landed heavy in the air between them like fabric settling across shoulders. Eva didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't. Instead, she bent over the mannequin and began resecuring the dangling buttons, pretending she couldn't feel his gaze like heat tracing the line of her neck. After a moment, he stepped back. "I have a board meeting," he said, "but I'll be thinking about that jacket." She looked up. "It's not finished." He nodded once. "Exactly," then he left. Later that evening, when the lights in the studio dimmed and the city glowed gold outside the wide windows, Eva pulled out the sketchbook she swore she wouldn't touch again. She flipped past pages of burned designs, water-stained outlines, ideas she'd once believed in. Toward the back, there was a blank page. For a long moment she stared at it. Then she began to draw, not for them, not even for him, but for the girl who once dreamed of showing the world something breathtaking, and for the woman who was learning she still could. It was a Tuesday when the eviction notice came. Eva found it taped to the cracked front door of her building, bright orange legal text, bolded as if volume could soften cruelty. She stared at the words for a long time, rain dripping from the brim of her coat. Tenants had 30 days to vacate. No appeals, no negotiations. Property redevelopment pending. She looked up at the building she'd called home for the last 4 years. The bricks were chipped, the stairs moaned under weight, and the radiator hissed like a temperamental ghost. But it was home. Her mother's sewing machine still sat by the window, untouched but never forgotten. Luis had painted the hallway last winter, swearing, "No more beige trauma walls." The corner bodega knew her favorite soda, and now it was all being erased, bought out and bulldozed, by Silhouette House. She nearly dropped the notice, but there it was on the bottom line under project sponsor Silhouette House, Harrington Real Estate Development Initiative, Cole's company, his family's money. The place she'd spent the last few weeks trying to forget she didn't belong in was now the same place threatening to displace her entire block. Back at the studio, Cole was leading a design strategy meeting on the mezzanine floor. The room was sleek and intimate whiteboards lined with fabric swatches, projection screens glowing with blueprints, and a marble table that cost more than Eva's entire yearly income. She wasn't invited, but she didn't care. She stormed in like thunder. Half a dozen execs looked up startled. Margot Harrington, regal in navy, sat at the head of the table. Dominic Walsh, the CFO, and Margot's ever-smirking shadow arched an eyebrow. Only Cole didn't look surprised, just curious. "Miss Moreno?" he said, calm and sharp. "Is something urgent?" Eva slammed the eviction notice on the table. It landed like a slap. "I think you already know." The silence grew teeth. Cole leaned forward, reading the notice. His eyes narrowed. "I wasn't aware this was connected to us." "Oh, it's more than connected," Eva said, voice trembling. "It's funded, approved, and fast-tracked by your board. My building. My neighbors. My block." Margot's lips tightened. "This is a strategic location for the flagship experience center. The vote was unanimous." "I didn't vote on this," Cole said, eyes flicking to Dominic. "You were overseas when it cleared," Dominic said smoothly. "We assumed you'd support it." Eva laughed, dry and furious. "So the plan is to bulldoze our lives so tourists can drink champagne under a chandelier made of thread spools." A beat. No one spoke. She looked directly at Cole now. "You said what I did matters. You said I wasn't invisible. But if this goes through, it proves I never mattered at all. Not to you. Not to this place." He stood, not loudly, but with purpose. "I didn't authorize this," he said, voice lower now. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," Eva snapped. "You should have." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hadn't meant to break in front of them, not here, not like this. But the rage in her chest had cracked open, and the grief came spilling out behind it. "This isn't just business," she whispered. "This is where I live, where people live who don't have backup apartments in Milan or parents on every board." Margot crossed her arms. "This isn't personal, Miss Moreno." Eva turned to her, eyes blazing. "It's only personal to the people losing everything." Cole found her later that afternoon on the studio's back-loading dock, where the scent of wet cardboard mixed with lavender from the fabric sprays. She didn't look at him. She was pacing, breathing too fast. "You okay?" he asked gently. She stopped walking. "Don't do that. Do what come at me with concern like you're not the CEO of the company bulldozing my life. I told you I didn't know." "But you benefited from it," she said, voice shaking. "You were profiting while we were figuring out if we could afford to fix the hot water. I'm not my mother. No. But you work in the house she built." That landed. Harder than either of them expected. Cole looked away, jaw tight. "I'm going to stop it," Eva scoffed. "You think one speech at the next board meeting is going to fix decades of erasure gentrification dressed up in silk?" "No," he said. "But it's a start." She stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. He stepped forward. "You asked why I cared." She said nothing. "I care," he continued, "because you remind me that this world wasn't built for people like you, and that makes it my responsibility to change it. Not in theory, in practice." She blinked at him, stunned. Then so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Do you mean that?" "Yes," he said. "And I'll prove it." By nightfall, Eva was back in her apartment, eviction notice still tacked to the fridge, taunting her like a bad joke. But her sketchbook sat open on the kitchen table now next to a candle, and her pencil didn't shake this time. Because something had shifted. Not resolved, but shifted. And maybe she wasn't as invisible as she thought. Eva sat on the bus ride home with her arms crossed tight across her chest, jaw clenched so hard her molars ached. The yellow interior lights flickered as the vehicle lurched over potholes. The rain outside reduced now to a fine mist against the glass. Her reflection stared back at her lipstick-smudged brows, furrowed eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But beneath the tiredness was something harder, angrier. This wasn't just about her apartment anymore. It was about how quickly people like her became collateral in someone else's vision. She replayed the moment Cole looked at the eviction notice. The flicker of surprise. The way his fingers curled slightly when he realized what it meant. But what did it matter? Surprise wasn't action. Guilt wasn't reversal. Intent didn't stop demolition crews. At her stop, she climbed out onto cracked pavement and stood there a beat too long, staring up at her aging apartment complex. Someone had pulled half the mailbox labels off already, probably the developer's team scouting renovations. It felt like a slow dismembering. When she reached her door, Luis was waiting with a folded newspaper in one hand and 2 mugs of tea in the other. "I heard," he said before she could say anything. "News travels fast when your landlord gets bought out by a fashion empire." She dropped her bag on the couch, her shoulders sagging. "You know what hurts most?" Luis raised his eyebrows. "I believed him," she said. "I thought maybe for once a man in power actually saw me. Not as a headline, not as a resume, just me." Luis handed her the tea. "Maybe he does." She looked up, eyes brimming. "That doesn't undo this. No. But it might change what comes next." At Silhouette House, Cole stood alone in the boardroom long after the meeting had ended. The eviction notice was still on the table, creased and slightly damp from where Ava's hand had trembled against it. Across from him sat a marketing mock-up renderings of the Silhouette Experience Center, champagne lounges, VR runways, a rooftop botanical gallery shaped like a dress hem. It looked impressive. It also looked hollow. He thought about the notes under Eva's desk, about the warmth in Naomi's eyes when she talked about Eva defending her, about how no one in that boardroom had flinched when she spoke because they'd stopped seeing people like her a long time ago. He used to think control was the highest form of leadership, that if he just kept everything precise, his image, his tone, his decisions, he could outpace his family's legacy and rebuild it in his own name. But Eva's words haunted him. You should have known. He had built a house on a foundation that was already pushing people out. Now, for the first time, he questioned whether he had the courage to gut it. Back in her apartment, Eva turned the eviction notice over and scrawled 2 words across the back in thick marker, "Not done." Then she taped it next to her sketches. A new kind of design was coming, not for a runway, but for survival. Naomi Chen stood in the center of the main studio, trembling. A garment bag lay open beside her, its contents splayed across the tile like fabric crime scene evidence. 2 ruined bodices, mismatched fastenings, and a red silk skirt that looked as though it had been cut by a blindfolded squirrel. "Who packed this?" barked Dominic Walsh, arms crossed and jaw locked. A circle of interns and assistants had gathered silently, none daring to step forward. Naomi, eyes wide and voice barely above a whisper, said, "I did. But I checked every label before I sealed it. I swear." Dominic shook his head. "The shipment went to Paris with incomplete samples. We missed our prep window. Do you have any idea what that means for the editors flying in?" "She didn't do this," Eva said, stepping forward. All eyes turned. Eva walked to Naomi's side, ignoring Dominic's looming presence. If anyone bothered to double-check the manifests, they'd see Naomi filed a correction request the day before the shipment left. Someone swapped boxes after her shift ended. Dominic didn't even look at Eva. "You're not senior staff, Miss Moreno. You don't get a say in disciplinary discussions." "I'm not speaking as staff," Eva said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm speaking as the only person in this room who's actually worked alongside Naomi." Cole entered then, just in time to hear the end of her sentence. He took in the scene quickly. The tension, the guilt on Naomi's face, the silent fear of every intern afraid of being next. "What's going on?" he asked. Dominic spun to face him. "A shipment was botched. One of your junior seamstresses failed to pack the right samples." "I didn't," Naomi said quietly. "Someone changed it after I clocked out." Cole turned to Eva. "You believe her?" Eva didn't hesitate. "Yes." Cole nodded once. "Then so do I." Dominic blinked. "You can't be serious. We need accountability." "We do." Cole cut in. "And that's exactly why we're not scapegoating a 22-year-old over a logistics failure that happened after hours." He turned to Naomi, his voice softening. "You've been working weekends. I've seen your attention to detail. Go take a break. We'll sort this out." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." Eva put a hand on Naomi's back as she passed. When the room had cleared, only Eva, Cole, and Dominic remained. Dominic crossed his arms. This kind of softness is what puts cracks in a brand's foundation. Cole didn't flinch. If doing the right thing puts a crack in the brand, maybe we need to redesign the whole building. Dominic scoffed and walked out. Silence fell. Cole turned to Eva. You didn't have to speak up. She's me, Eva said simply. 10 years ago, same eyes, same fear, same desperate hope that someone in charge might care. He studied her for a long moment. You ever think about mentoring? Eva laughed under her breath. Not since my own mentor ghosted me after the fire. I'm serious, he said. We've talked about launching a talent incubator, young designers, seamstresses, textile artists. You could lead the first round. She blinked. Me? Why not? I'm a temp assistant. No, he said. You're an anchor. Everyone in this building just doesn't know it yet. She looked at him, heart thudding. And for the first time, when she imagined her name on something again, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like a return. Later that day, Eva found Naomi sewing at a side table, quiet but focused. She placed a mug of warm tea beside her and sat down. Naomi looked up. I thought I was done. You're just getting started, Eva said. Naomi hesitated. Why did you fight for me? Because someone should have fought for me when I was you. Eva answered, her voice thick with emotion. Naomi nodded, then reached into her sketch pad and tore out a small paper heart she doodled on break. She scribbled 2 words and handed it to Eva. Thank you. Eva folded it gently and tucked it into her pocket. She didn't need applause. This was better. This was real. That night, Eva returned home with thread under her fingernails and a strange lightness in her chest. She taped Naomi's heart next to her eviction notice, and beneath it she added a post-it that read, The future deserves better. Let's build it. The studio lights buzzed softly overhead as the storm outside picked up, tapping steadily against the tall windows of Silhouette House. The earlier confrontation had settled into a hum of quiet resolve. Most of the staff had cleared out for the evening, leaving behind only the faint scent of pressed muslin and cinnamon tea. Eva stayed. So did Cole, and Naomi refusing to go home despite Cole's insistence. She sat at a corner workbench, carefully hand-sewing trim onto a sample jacket, headphones in, but clearly not listening to music. Her movements were slow, almost meditative, like she was sewing herself back together stitch by stitch. Eva hovered nearby, not to supervise, but simply to be close. She's good, Cole said quietly. Eva turned. He stood beside her, arms folded, his gaze focused on Naomi. She's better than I was at that age, Eva replied. And more disciplined. I used to stitch with jazz blaring and peanut butter on my hands. He chuckled softly. That tracks. Eva smiled despite herself. I forget sometimes that she's just a kid, you know. All she wants is to be taken seriously. Isn't that what everyone wants? Eva tilted her head. I think some people want to be seen. People like Naomi. People like me. We want to matter. That's different. Cole was quiet for a moment, nodding slightly. Then he reached into his coat pocket and held something out to her, a pair of cufflinks. Deep navy with a hand-stitched silk inlay, a pattern she instantly recognized. Her breath caught. Is that from your salvage jacket? He said. Naomi gave me the scraps. Eva turned them over in her palm. The fabric had once belonged to a failed sample from her fire-destroyed collection, now reborn into something small, elegant, and symbolic. I thought I was the only one who remembered this pattern, she whispered. You were wrong, he said. Naomi remembered. I remembered. She looked up, unsure what to say. He hesitated, then added, You've been holding this place together in invisible ways. You're not just patching gowns. You're repairing culture. The words hit harder than she expected. Eva blinked down at the cufflinks again, the threads catching in the light like tiny veins. I used to think if I stitched enough for everyone else, she said, maybe I could stitch myself back together too. Cole's voice was low, almost reverent. You don't need stitching, Eva. You need a runway. She laughed once quietly. A bit dramatic, don't you think? Only because it's true. They stood there in comfortable silence for a while, just watching Naomi finish the hem. Rain streaked the windows. The overhead lights cast long gold shadows. And for the first time, Eva didn't feel like a ghost in the house of dreams. She felt like someone who belonged. By the time the storm hit its stride, the ceiling in Studio 3 had already begun to leak. At first, it was a soft drip, then a hiss, then the unmistakable splatter of water hitting silk. "Grab the gowns," Naomi shouted. Eva was already halfway across the room, skidding across the polished floor in socked feet, gathering hemlines off the ground. Outside, thunder cracked so sharply it rattled the window frames. Water gushed through a seam near the overhead beam. "Elevate the racks," someone called. "Seal the bins." The space erupted into movement, interns, scrambling seamstresses, dragging tables, fabric being hoisted like sails in a storm. For a moment it was chaos. And then Cole appeared, barefoot, shirt sleeves rolled up, hauling a rack of gowns like he'd done it 100 times. No suit, no pretense, just soaked to the bone and moving with purpose. Eva blinked at the sight. He caught her staring and gave a crooked half-smile. "Told you I'm a decent driver in a crisis." "You're a menace," she said, breathless, hauling a bin of hand-stitched bodices into the hall. "But I'll allow it tonight." Another leak opened, this one over the embroidery station. Cole grabbed a tarp from a corner shelf and threw it over the table while Eva held it in place. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning lit up the entire glass facade. They worked shoulder to shoulder, soaked and panting until the worst of it passed. Afterward, Eva stood near the emergency supply closet, wringing out her curls into a towel. Her shirt clung to her skin. Her cheeks glowed from exertion. The studio, now dimmed and silent, looked like a battlefield fabric, hanging limp buckets collecting water laughter echoing from somewhere down the hallway as someone lit candles for light. Then she felt it. The shift. She turned, and there he was. Cole stood just a few feet away, a slow breath rising and falling in his chest. His shirt was plastered to him, water glistening in his hair, his cufflinks missing his expression, stripped of all its usual armor. Eva swallowed. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "You better now." Their eyes held. She should have looked away. She didn't. The rain whispered against the windows, gentler now, like applause fading after the last note of a concert. He took one step forward. "This place. It's loud with ambition," he said. "But when everything flooded, the only thing I cared about saving was what you've touched." She stared at him. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I do." Another beat. Then softly, "You still think you were the one who got into the wrong car?" Eva stepped closer, heart fluttering. "No. I think maybe you were the one who needed to be hijacked." That made him laugh, quiet, real unguarded. And then they were inches apart. Neither reached for the other. It just happened, like gravity, like instinct. Their lips met softly at first like a question, then again deeper, more certain, not desperate, not dramatic, just earned. They broke apart only when laughter echoed down the hall again, Naomi's teasing and bright. Eva rested her forehead against his, both of them, still breathless. "Still soaked," she whispered. He smiled. "Comes with the territory." Outside, the rain finally stopped. But inside, something new had begun to bloom. Not a storm, not a fire. Something softer, something stitched. They didn't speak right away. The kiss had ended, but the moment hadn't. Eva stood with her forehead still resting lightly against Cole's. The only sounds around them, the distant laughter of interns drying out linen, and the rhythmic drip of rain tapering off the awnings outside. Her pulse was still sprinting, not from the adrenaline of the flood or the chaos of saving fabric, but from him, from what they'd just shared. She had kissed people before. She had kissed people after success, after failure, even after grief. But not like this. Not after being seen. Cole finally pulled back just enough to look at her. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of wet hair away from her cheek, his fingers lingering longer than necessary. "You good?" he asked, voice low. Eva gave a small nod, then unexpectedly laughed. He blinked. "What?" She shook her head, smiling. I don't do this." This being kissing barefoot billionaires in soaked linen while dodging ceiling leaks. Cole grinned. "Strange." That's how I start all my board meetings." She snorted. It startled them both. It was real. Too real. She stepped back, finally breaking the closeness, wrapping her arms around herself as if to preserve what had just happened. Cole didn't chase the distance. He just watched her quiet, thoughtful. Eva spoke again, voice steadier now. "This doesn't mean anything's fixed. I know. There's still the board, the eviction, your mother, I know. And I'm still—" She hesitated, gesturing vaguely at herself. "Me." He stepped closer again, not to close the gap, but to say this plainly. "I don't want to fix you or change you. I just want to keep showing up." She looked at him. There was something terrifying about how gently he said that. She wanted to believe it, wanted to believe he wasn't just swept up in the storm and the stitching and the kiss. "You know this doesn't end neatly, right?" she asked. "Nothing real ever does," he replied. The door creaked as Naomi popped her head in. "There you are." "I brought dry towels and like 6 paper cups of tea from the break room. Also, sorry if I interrupted anything romantic." "Kind of. Not really." Eva shot her a look. Naomi grinned and disappeared again. Cole chuckled. "I think she's rooting for us. She's 17. She roots for everyone who makes eye contact longer than 5 seconds. Eva stepped toward the door, then paused. "You meant it. What you said earlier about building something different." He didn't hesitate. "I did. Then prove it." "I will." She nodded. And for a moment, just a breath, they looked at each other, not as boss and assistant, not as a fashion prodigy and a polished CEO, but as 2 people standing barefoot in a place neither of them expected to find meaning. There was still a storm coming, but for now, they were dry. Together. The photo hit the internet at 6:07 a.m. A single frame, grainy but unmistakable, captured through the rain-slicked lens of a security camera mounted on the west wing of Silhouette House. In it, Eva barefoot, laughing in the hallway, light her curls wild from the storm, and Cole, one hand at her cheek, the other steady at her waist, mid-kiss, mid-everything. The headline practically wrote itself: "Billionaire CEO caught in rainy embrace with unknown assistant, scandal brews at Silhouette House." By 8 a.m. it was trending. By 8:30 the board was assembled. Eva didn't see the headline first. Naomi did. She burst into the fabric room with wide eyes and a phone clutched in both hands. "You need to see this." Eva took one glance and sat down hard on a crate of fabric rolls. It felt like the ground had opened again. Except this time there were spectators. She scrolled through the attached images. Screenshots of the footage, zoomed in stills of her face, comments under every post. "CEO caught with employee nepotism much. If she's a designer, I'm Beyoncé. Figures. She probably cried about rent and stitched her way to the top." Her chest clenched. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about the kiss. It was about power. How fast people used it. How fast they assumed you were using it too. Cole stood at the head of the glass conference table as Margot Harrington tapped her manicured nails against the wood in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Dominic Walsh sat beside her, looking far too pleased. "Tell me it's a misunderstanding," Margot said. "It's not," Cole replied simply. "So you admit it?" Dominic asked. "You kissed an employee on company property, after hours, during a crisis." "I kissed a person," Cole corrected. "A person who happened to be helping save our collection." Margot arched a brow. "This person has no title, no credentials, and now no anonymity." Cole's jaw tensed. "Her name is Eva Moreno. She's been working quietly behind the scenes to hold this company together. I won't let her be scapegoated because of your approval ratings." "This isn't personal," Cole Margot said coldly. "It's about perception. You mean profit. I mean protecting the legacy your father built." Cole leaned forward. "If that legacy can't handle honesty, then maybe it's time we rethink the brand." The room went still. Margot's eyes narrowed. "You're dangerously close to making this your resignation speech." Cole smiled tightly. "Then let's make it memorable." Eva didn't wait for him to come find her. She met him halfway down the central corridor, the walls lined with sketches and silhouettes that suddenly looked like strangers. "You okay?" he asked. "No," He nodded. Same. I told you this wouldn't end clean, she said. I didn't want clean, he said. I wanted true. Eva shook her head. They'll drag me for this. I'll take the heat. That's not the point, she snapped, stepping back. If you take the fall, it makes it look like you were the one in control. Like I'm just some sob story who got lucky. You're not. Then don't treat me like one. He paused, surprised, then respectful. I didn't mean to, he said. I know, she said. But you still did. They stood there, the hallway quiet around them. Just the low hum of voices behind distant doors and the weight of a dozen possible futures pressing down between them. Then softer, I didn't come here to fall in love, Cole. I didn't either. So now what? He exhaled slowly. Now, we decide if we're brave enough to keep going. That night, Eva packed a small box. Not because she'd been fired, no one had said that yet, but because she knew how these stories usually ended. She'd lived through one already. But this time something stopped her. A single note taped to her locker, written in Naomi's messy handwriting. You matter. We see you. Don't leave yet. Next to it, pinned quietly, was one of Eva's thank you notes, folded, worn, and now signed. C. She pressed her palm to the paper, and for the first time in a long time, she stayed. That night, Eva climbed to the rooftop of her building. The air still smelled like rain, but the sky had cleared, stars stretching above the city like distant glittering sequins. Below her, Chicago buzzed on, oblivious. Somewhere a siren wailed. Somewhere a saxophone echoed from an open window, life uncaring and unpausing. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and leaned against the rusted railing. Her phone buzzed again, another alert, another headline, another text she wasn't ready to read. She let it go dark. Across the rooftop, laundry lines snapped in the wind. Someone had left a chair and a broken umbrella tipped against the wall. Familiar and unwanted memories swelled in her chest the last time she'd been in a spotlight. She hadn't asked for the last time a dream had gone up in smoke. Only now it wasn't fabric catching fire. It was her name, her face. Again. Unknown assistant. Like her name had never mattered. Like the only interesting thing about her was who kissed her and when. She closed her eyes, and that was when she heard the footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She didn't have to. I figured I'd find you here, Cole said. She gave a quiet laugh. Of course you did. You've got a weird sixth sense for my hiding spots. No, he said softly. I just remembered what you told me once. You don't need fixing, you need a rooftop. That pulled a small, aching smile from her. He walked to her side, giving her space. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was earned. The kind that held weight like a seam stretched taut across two pieces of fabric waiting to be sewn. Do you regret it? She asked. The kiss. No. This. Me. All of it. He didn't answer right away. I regret letting them speak about you like you were disposable, he said. I regret not being louder in that room. She looked at him surprised. You were the loudest one. He shook his head. Not enough. Not when it counted. They stood there a while watching headlights pass like comets below. Then he said, You know what I realized today? She arched a brow. They can publish 1,000 stories, but they'll never tell the real one. And what's the real one? That a girl got into the wrong car and taught a man how to build the right kind of empire. Ava looked at him, and for the first time she didn't feel like someone surviving a scandal. She felt like someone who had chosen to stay, who had stood her ground not for the man, but for the message, for the people who believed in her quietly behind sewing machines and pinned sketches and stolen lunch breaks. You still want to do this? She asked. He nodded. Only if you're still beside me. She took his hand, and for once the silence said everything. Fashion Week arrived with more thunder than the skies could muster. The Silhouette House venue was unrecognizable, its vaulted ceilings strung with light, its runways shaped like cascading ribbons of steel and glass. Backstage models milled about in half-constructed gowns, assistants zipped and pinned in frantic rhythm, and producers whispered into headsets like generals preparing for battle. Eva hadn't planned to be here, not center stage anyway. She'd come to help quietly in the background, as always. She wore black slacks, a tool belt, and a name badge with no title. Just Eva. Naomi was the one who led her to the back of the showroom and handed her a folder. "You should see this," she said. Inside were pages of sketches. Her sketches. Refined, prepped, signed at the bottom with her looping initials EM. Eva looked up confused. "Where did you get these?" Naomi smiled. "Cole submitted them 2 weeks ago, said he wanted your work to speak louder than the noise." Eva's breath caught. Her designs were on the lineup. And not just in any segment, the closing segment, the finale, the place reserved for legends or rising stars handpicked by the board. She was neither. She was something else. From the front row, Margot Harrington sat like an empress, composed, impeccable, and impossible to read. Her diamond brooch glittered like a warning light. Dominic sat beside her, lips tight. Cole entered late, choosing to stand instead of sit behind the final row. Hands folded. No speech, no press. This wasn't about him. Not tonight. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. And the runway lit like a fuse. Gowns flowed like memory-structured silhouettes with soft rebellion, oversized shoulders, bare backs, exposed seams turned into statements, hidden messages embroidered into inner hems, the past stitched into every panel. The crowd held its breath. Then the final model stepped out. A black woman in her 60s, hair in silver coils, wearing a deep crimson suit inspired by Eva's very first post-fire design. The one that never made it to a runway until now. A single spotlight followed her. Then another. Eva stepped onto the runway herself, not in heels or haute couture, but in a wide-leg jumpsuit she'd made from repurposed silk samples. Minimal, bold, hers. For a long beat, no one clapped. Then Margot stood, slowly, and began to applaud. Others followed. One by one, the audience rose. Eva looked out, not at the cameras, not at the glittering crowd, but at the staff lining the walls, the interns behind the curtains, Naomi sobbing into her palms. She looked at Cole. He mouthed one word. "Stay." And this time she didn't hesitate. Backstage chaos buzzed around them. But in one quiet corridor, Cole found her. He didn't speak at first. He just touched the folded cuff of her sleeve where she'd embroidered a line in fine white thread. "Still here? You never owed me anything," he said. She smiled. "Then why does it feel like we're just getting started?" He exhaled. "Because we are." A beat, then like a stitch through silk. "Walk beside me," he said. Eva took his hand. "Only if we walk forward." Outside, the sky cleared, and somewhere in a building that had once held her silence, her name now hung in gold thread beside the others. Eva Moreno, designer. Not hidden. Not erased. Claimed. The applause faded, but its echo lingered for days. The morning after the show, Eva stood in the Silhouette House garden courtyard, an often-forgotten outdoor space tucked behind the main building, overgrown with ivy and half-covered in tarp from the recent storm. Cole found her there, crouched near the wall, her fingers tracing the edges of cracked concrete. "I didn't know this existed," she said when he approached. "Most people don't. My father called it unfinished." She glanced back at him. "So it got ignored." He nodded. He didn't like things that didn't fit the brand. She looked back at the vines. "But unfinished isn't failure. It's just a start." He stepped beside her and offered something from his pocket, an old iron key, slightly rusted, its tag worn to near blankness. "What's this?" she asked. "It used to open the rooftop studio," he said, "where my father worked before meetings and press and legacy got in the way. I want to reopen it for real this time. Not for the brand. For people like you. For the ones they'd rather forget." Eva turned the key over in her hand. "You don't need my permission," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I want your partnership." She looked at him, at the man who used to be a stranger behind a wheel, who now stood beside her with vulnerability etched into every line of his face. "Then we do it together," she said. "No more locked doors." He smiled. And it wasn't the polite kind she'd seen at board meetings or interviews. It was real, crooked, a little tired, a lot hopeful. "Eva Moreno," he said, stepping closer. "You kissed me in the middle of a storm and changed everything." She laughed. "You drove me through traffic without saying a word and made me question all my life choices." Fair. Their hands met between them, calloused fingers and soft palms warm despite the wind. "I don't know where this leads," he admitted. She nodded. "I don't need a map, just the next few steps." They walked back inside together. Weeks later, the newly restored rooftop studio opened under a different name, The Foundry. It was raw, sunlit, and messy in the best ways. Naomi hung fairy lights along the beams. Cole installed floor-to-ceiling windows with his own 2 hands. Eva brought in bolts of fabric from independent vendors who'd once been told their work wasn't on brand. No velvet ropes, no staged photos, just process, just growth, just people being seen. Eva still taped thank you notes under her desk, but now others started doing it too. One from Naomi read, "For showing me it's okay to be loud when the world tries to mute you." One from Cole, "For the car ride that saved me." And one from Eva herself pinned at the center, "We are not accidents. We are the design." 3 months later, Eva stood in front of the mirror in her new workspace at the Foundry, measuring tape draped around her neck like a ribbon of memory. The city buzzed beyond the tall windows, and the scent of steamed muslin and espresso filled the air. The studio was alive, threads on spools, ideas on the walls, music in the corner playing something soft and honest. She hadn't expected to feel this way. Not after everything, the kiss, the fallout, the headlines, the choices. But now there was space, room to breathe, to try, to fail beautifully, and begin again. A knock echoed from the sliding door. Cole stepped in suit jacket, off sleeves, rolled his hands dusty from helping Naomi rearrange bolts of fabric downstairs. His hair was a mess. He looked at home. "You're late," Eva teased. "I brought bribes," he replied, holding up 2 paper bags from the corner bakery. She raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess almond croissant for me, plain for you, because simplicity is elegance." He smirked. "You've been paying too much attention." They settled into the oversized armchairs near the windows, watching the late afternoon light fall in golden ribbons across the floor. For a while, they didn't talk. They didn't need to. Then softly he asked, "Do you miss the old life?" Eva tilted her head. "Which one?" "The one where no one knew your name, where the spotlight didn't follow." She thought about it. "I miss the quiet sometimes," she admitted. "But not the hiding, not pretending like I didn't want to create again." Cole nodded. "And you?" she asked. "Do you miss being the untouchable CEO?" He shrugged. "I miss pretending I had all the answers." That made her laugh. "I don't miss who I was," he added. "Not when I didn't know what it meant to really listen. To stand in the room and not take up all the air." "You're still learning," she said. "So are you." They looked at each other then, the way people do when time has passed and scars have softened. "I've been thinking," he said after a beat. "Dangerous," she replied. He nudged her knee with his. "About something longer term." She stilled. Not in fear, but in focus. "I'm not talking about marriage," he clarified. "Not yet." Her lips curved into a teasing smile. "Scared I'd say yes, terrified you'd say no." She leaned back, considering him. Then she said, "Let's do something scarier." He blinked, like what builds something that isn't just about us? Something that lasts whether we're still together or not. He stared at her proud, moved maybe a little in awe. "What would we call it?" he asked. She thought. Then pulled a pen from her pocket and wrote on the side of his coffee cup, "Common thread." For the overlooked, the starting over, the stitched together souls, for people like her, people like him, people who dared to begin again. They stayed in that soft golden silence for a long time. Outside the sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the city like stitches pulling daylight closed. Inside the Foundry, the last of the interns filtered out with waves and tired grins, leaving Eva and Cole alone surrounded by bolts of fabric and unspoken dreams. Cole studied the name she'd written on his cup, common thread, his thumb brushing over the ink like it was fragile. "It's simple," he said. Eva nodded. "That's the point. Not branded, not corporate, not about us." He looked at her. "But it started with us." She smiled faintly. "Started with a car ride." He chuckled. "And a woman monologuing about oatmeal rent and existential dread." Eva snorted. "Don't forget the broken umbrella and my lecture about oat milk being a capitalist conspiracy. You had charts." She laughed, open and easy now. No tension behind her ribs. Just joy. That was new. That was rare. Cole grew quiet again, his gaze drifting toward the mood board Eva had pinned earlier, photos of interns laughing during fitting swatches from street vendors' markets, sketches from Naomi, and 3 others who had never dared to call themselves designers until now. "This place," he said softly, "it's becoming something I never thought Silhouette House could be." Eva followed his eyes. "It's because it's being built by people who were never allowed to imagine themselves here." "You imagined it." "No," she said. "I remembered it. From when I was 14, from my mom's kitchen table, from every thank you note I ever taped under a desk because I was too scared to own my own worth." She paused, voice thickening. "This isn't just a workspace. It's a rewrite." He turned to her fully then. "So what do we do next?" Eva looked down at her hands, the calluses on her fingers from months of late nights and seam work. Then up at him, this man who'd once been a passenger in her story, now walking beside her, not ahead. "We do what we've always done," she said. "We listen. We make room. We hand out scissors, not ladders." He nodded, the weight of that answer sinking in. Then unexpectedly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Eva's breath caught. "It's not a ring," he said quickly. "Not yet." She blinked. "Okay." He opened the pouch and took out a thimble brass, old, beautifully worn. "It was my mother's," he said. "From before Silhouette House. Before any of this." Eva stared at it. "I want you to have it," he said. "Not because it's pretty, because it's a reminder that everything we build now should fit human hands." She took it, cradling it like an heirloom. "It will," she said, "because we won't forget who we're making space for." And with the lights dimming and the world finally quiet around them, Cole leaned forward. He didn't kiss her. He rested his forehead to hers like a promise, and between them the pattern for everything that came next began to form. Sometimes the wrong car takes you exactly where you were meant to go. This was a story about storms and stitches, about being seen after being silenced, and about building something that lasts, not for show, but for soul. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever started over with trembling hands and quiet hope, this one was for you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe that love, purpose, and second chances are worth fighting for, make sure to subscribe and click on the stories on your screen to keep watching more just like this. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next story.